So we're continuing with our series, Just 10, as we're looking through the 10 Commandments. And so this one it's a really interesting one. You know, it's talking about keeping the Sabbath. And so it comes from Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, and it goes, "Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath and set it apart as holy." Who knows that in today's society, or who agrees with me that in today's society, we need all the help we can to navigate the challenges of embracing rest in our busy lives? We're not really restful people. Because guess what? We've always got something that we're doing. Our attention is always focused on something. If it's not the kids that you're looking after, you've got technology that's bombarding messages to you each and every single day. And so what you do is that you get text messages, you get notifications on your phone, and your attention is constantly diverted. Then you think that the office stops when you leave the office. No, it goes with you at home. And so they give you a phone, and so you'll be very happy that, oh, my job has given me a phone. They must like me. No, they're trapping you so that they can get in touch with you any single time. And so we hear these words in our society today: I'm too busy. Where did the time go? And so then we deal with the complexities of modern life, where back in the days, shops were closed on a Sunday, but now they're open at 10 or 11. And wherever you go to the shopping centers, it is always packed. And so normally people would do their grocery shopping on a Saturday. Now that's moved to a Sunday. And it's even complicated before that. Now you've got sports that are taking place on Sundays. And so there's all these pressures that families have got to deal with. Do I take my kids to sport? Do I bring them to church? I don't know. That's a hard question. What's my position on that? Maybe this commandment about rest in our lives is what we need in this information-rich age. So I used to have this is my stance on Sunday sport. Now, back in the days when we were really on-fire Christians, we would say nothing stops us from getting to church. And so I remember my kids back when they were a bit younger, we were living in Port Hedland at the time, they said, we want to play sports, soccer on Sunday. I said, nope, no soccer on Sunday, it's church. But I think as time progressed, my stance, and this is a personal opinion, this is not the Lord, this is me. My personal opinion on that was that, you know what, let the kid play sport. It's not the end of the world. And also, and this is not about your child becoming a professional in the sport, although some kids do grow up and do become professionals. I think we need to introduce a freedom into our lives where, yes, they're allowed to do these kind of things. But what we also have to do is that we never abandon the gathering together of our families and letting them know that actually this is what we believe as a family, that we go to church on a Sunday. But what you're doing is a privilege. But I also do think that what we then need to say is we always provide opportunities for raising our kids in the things of the Lord, setting that time aside. And I'll be the first to say that has still been a challenge, where you do try to set the time aside. We used to have Sunday meetings, and because my wife used to take so long, we banned them. The Sunday meetings. And they used to have morning prayer before they used to go to school. Sooner or later, that all finished. And so now you have to steal the moments to actually get together as a family, to actually stop And I think we have to be very intentional about the way we do these things, where we become, you know what, I'm now going to steal the moment. As they get older, the regimented stuff possibly doesn't work because of the season of life. And so what you do is that you steal the moments. Whenever you get a moment, you gather everybody and you just share with one another. You pray with one another. My first introduction to the Sabbath came from a Jewish guidance counselor at school. And so what she would say to us, she would say, look, I don't do any work on the Sabbath. So what we have to do on the day before the Sabbath, we have to cut the toilet paper because that for them was considered work. Now, that's my understanding as a 12-year-old boy, as she explained these things to me, that, we don't do any work on a Sabbath. So they were very careful about the things that they did on a Sabbath day. The 10 Commandments are organized into two groups. The first 4 focus on our conduct toward God, and the next 6, which we've already been through, focus on our conduct toward one another. And so the idea of Sabbath rest in the Hebrew scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, there are 2 main Hebrew words that were used for rest in the Bible. The first is Shabbat, which partially gets translated into English as the word Sabbath. And so this word simply means to stop working. We all understand about stopping work. As soon as you leave the office, you've stopped working. You clock out. At the end of your shift, your work is done, and there is no more work to do until you clock back in the next day. Now, perhaps for some of you, when you get to work, you've got to put a biometric scanner where you scan your finger, and it clocks you in. And then at the end of the day, when you leave, you put your finger in that, it reads your fingerprint, and it scans you out. And so work stops for you when you check out of work. The other main Hebrew word for rest used in the scriptures is nuach. And this means to dwell or to settle. And this is not the same as clocking out from an hourly job. This is the type of rest that you would get, for example, when you go to visit or you're sitting in front of a fire with people that you care about, or when you unpack a suitcase at your grandmother's house when you go on holiday. So there's 2 things here. There is the clocking out of work, and there is the dwelling or the settling. God introduces these 2 concepts around the same time in Scripture. In the creation account, it says God worked for 6 days creating the world, and then he rests on the 7th day, which is Genesis 2, verse 2 to 3. And so after 6 days of bringing order to chaos, he takes the time to Shabbat. Let me just cool off from the work that I did, and let me just reflect on what I've done. A few verses later, we read that God creates humans and then immediately rests them, or he settles them, nuach, in the garden with him. In Genesis 2:15, it says, then the Lord took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it. And so Pastor Clinton yesterday challenged us as men about our relationship and fellowship with God. And there is something about walking and talking with God as what Adam and Eve were doing in the garden. They were just fellowshipping. And so there's a dynamic that is happening, that there's relationship that we have with the Lord and there is fellowship. And so sometimes fellowship is just about sitting and doing nothing. When you sit at a fire and you're just having a chat, there is no expectation of anything. You are just enjoying one another's presence. And that's the power of fellowship in our lives. So the question I have for us is, to Sabbath or not to Sabbath? And that's really the question. Do we Sabbath or don't we Sabbath? And so he says in Exodus chapter 20 that, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The command is to respect the 7th day as a day of rest where you do no work. The rest was for Israel, and he made sure that he covered everybody. And then he goes on to say to keep it holy. He wanted us to make sure that there was a sacred time in their life, a time separated for rest. Our minds are always constantly thinking about stuff. If we're not at work, we're thinking about work. But God is here giving us a picture of what life should be like, where, yes, remember that he's not saying don't work. He says you've got 6 days to work, but then also you have to rest on the 7th day, which means we have to take a deliberate step to pull back and just to ease off and allow natural time to do its things, where we're not so reflective on our work. So in 6 days, he made the heavens and the earth. And so God establishes the pattern for the Sabbath at the time of creation. So God is basically saying to us, I created the universe and I still found time to rest in my work. Now, it's very hard for some of us human beings who are just workaholics. Everything that we do is all about work, work, work. I don't have much time. No, sorry, I've got work to do. I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And so rest becomes a concept that is foreign to us. We have to cease to rest and to cease from work. He's saying to them, he's trying to get them to understand that when you were in Egypt as slaves, you did all the working. But guess what? You're now coming into the promised land where you're not going to be having a lot to do. And there is just an explanation of the rest that we get when we come into a relationship with Christ, that there is no work that we can do when we come into relationship with Christ. So we understand this particular scripture in Exodus chapter 20, not just with the perspective of the whole Bible, not just that single passage. So we see that there's a real sense in which Jesus fulfilled the purpose and plan for the Sabbath for us and in us. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9, Hebrews 4, I'll just quickly turn to it. It says, so there is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. But if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall. So there is something that we have to get in our lives in this busy world that we live in, that we have to create the space for rest in our lives. Because if we keep going, well, it's only going to end in disaster down the track. So you can imagine that if you buy a vehicle and you keep driving it without going for the scheduled maintenance. Back in the days, you would have an excuse to forget your maintenance because the car would not tell you. Nowadays, the cars that we have, they actually tell you that they have a sign. My car does that. You got to go for service, that it's due for a service. And that is telling us that this issue of rest is inbuilt into the way things happen. Your phone has got rest inbuilt in it. Because guess what happens? They'll send you and say, the update is ready for your phone. Now, that's a moment of rest where they're fixing things. And so rest is already, it's something that is inbuilt. The whole of Scripture makes it clear that under the new covenant, no one is under obligation to observe a Sabbath day. Galatians 4:10 tells us that Christians are not bound to observe days and months and seasons and years. The rest we enter into as Christians is something to experience every day, not just one day a week. The rest of knowing we don't have to work to save ourselves because our salvation is accomplished in Jesus. So in the new covenant, the idea isn't that there is no Sabbath, but that every day is a day of Sabbath rest in the finished work of God. Since the shadow of the Sabbath is fulfilled in Jesus, we are now free to keep any particular day or no day. So we have to make sure that as Christians today, we dare not ignore the importance of a day of rest. God has built us so that we need one. And I think this is the key thing, is that, like I gave the example of the cars and the phones, that if you don't get the regular rest, if the car doesn't get the service, it will keep going, but after a while, It's going to break down. If you don't take that time to rest and to reflect on everything that the Lord has done for you, and you keep going and going and going, it is only a matter of time before you burn out. Before the things that you're working hard for, you can't enjoy them because you'll be 6 feet under, and other people will enjoy it for you. So I'm taking some rest because I'm going to enjoy everything the Lord has given me. I ain't leaving nothing to my kids. No. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So that's always the goal. So we are dealing, our modern life is very complex. They are the complexities of modern life. And so how do we embrace this Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, which instructs us to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy? So it presents challenges. Remember those phones? Man, they disappeared, 20 odd years ago? Well, they started to sort of like disappear. Remember the days when you had to phone and you had to, you had to keep dialing and dialing. How lucky we are that times have changed. So the challenges, the complexities of a modern life for us is the busyness and time constraints. Our modern life is characterized by a fast-paced and demanding schedule, leaving little time for rest and reflection. There is a constant pressure to always be producing. Oh, sorry. And the fear of falling behind can, sorry, little Noah, sorry, man, can make it difficult to prioritize and allocate dedicated Sabbath time. Like I was very honest that we used to Sunday meetings, and they started off well. And then after a while, because I think it was mostly me, because I can't concentrate for a very long time. And so if the meeting starts to go on and on and on, I'm like, you know what, it's time to get out of here. And so the meeting's finished. Then what made them worse was that my mother-in-law would start singing, and her songs would never end as she kept singing. And there was this rolling of eye. Oh, no. I say, Grandma, okay, that's, just cool it with the singing. And she would go on, and the verses would just keep going on and on. But the funny thing is that I miss those moments, as bad as they were at times, when it would go on forever. But there was just something about it that centers you, that allows you to pause and you get something out of it. I recall one of my work colleagues saying many, many years ago, she says that every Friday is Takeout Friday for our family. And she says no matter where our children go in the world, they will always know that Friday is Takeout Day. And when you think of that, is that these are some of the traditions we put in our families of gathering with one another and reflecting and enjoying each other's presence. And those are really important things, these traditions to have in our families where we gather with one another, because when we reflect on them, we recognize the richness of what God has given us. We reflect back on everything that He's done for us. The other challenge that we are presented in our modern lives is constant connectivity and work-life integration. There isn't, back in the days when you used to leave work, when you left the office, you really left the office. Even if they wanted to get in touch with you, they would be able to get in touch with you if you had a phone at home. They would ring. But on normal occasions, once you clocked off at 5 or whatever time it was, that's it. They will see you the next day. If it was a Friday, they would see you on the Monday. If you were on leave for 4 weeks, they would see you afterwards. And if they really wanted you, they would come to your house if something was really bad. But now work and our personal lives have become so integrated. We have, I have probably 10,000 unanswered emails on my personal email. People just, they send you emails. Now, a lot of it is just You know when you sign up for for something and then they keep sending you emails, maybe 5, 10 emails a day, a week? That's what that 10,000 is. So there is just this integration where we don't know, are we at work or are we at home? Because we're doing both all the time. Technology has blurred the boundaries between our work and our personal life, making it very challenging to disconnect and to create a space for rest. Communication doesn't necessarily happen as much nowadays because you could be in a house and everybody is on their own device. Normally, I know what happens in our house is that people tend to come out from their caves when something happens to the Wi-Fi to say, is anything wrong with the Wi-Fi? And so we're dealing with this expectation of constant availability, and the ability to work remotely can lead to difficulties in setting boundaries and actually fully embracing a day of rest. And I wonder, has there ever been a day where you're so thankful? I was talking to Fern. Fern is our finance manager, and she says, she went on holiday, and she says, we went to somewhere in Nanap, I think, and she said there was no reception. I mean, who longs for a day where we just have a day where your phone is deliberately switched off and nobody can get in touch with you, and you just have a moment to yourself and a moment even with your family to just sit and reflect. So this is what the constant connectivity does for us. It creates these challenges of embracing this Sabbath day lifestyle. We've got societal expectations and cultural norms. Rest and leisure can be devalued in societies that prioritize productivity and material success. This is why you've heard the words of people saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead, because they believe in this constant thing, I've always got to be working. Now, it sounds great for TV. It makes you look a bit of a hero if you're a sporting person that says that, wow, he's always engaged in sport. But it's actual nonsense. You actually need time to disengage. So it sounds good, well, I'm going to be like so-and-so. He doesn't rest. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, you sleep sooner if you don't rest. And I have this problem. Like if my kids are just sitting, I'm like, why are you sitting? You should be doing something. Like who just sits and does nothing? You can't be idle. You've got to be doing something. And so we've got this pressure to conform as well to a 24/7 consumer culture where businesses and activities operate non-stop, making it challenging to step away and to honor the Sabbath in our lives. Internal mindset and guilt. We've got some individuals struggle with feelings of guilt, of being unproductive when not engaged in some activity. Oh, that's so bad. Oh, I should be doing something. No, you need to pause and cool your heels. So the desire to achieve and meet personal or societal expectations creates this internal resistance to embracing rest. I've always got to be doing something. And so we view rest as a waste of time or a hindrance to our personal progress. And I believe what the Lord is doing through this particular commandment, it's an invitation to trust. Will you trust me? Because sometimes there is a fear element to say, if I stop working, will I be able to meet all the requirements or the responsibilities that I have? In Exodus chapter 16, verse 3, it says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. Now, this is the Israelites moaning. We sat there in Egypt. We sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. Then the Lord said to Moses, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick as much food as they need for that day. And he goes on to say, I would test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they will gather food, and when they prepare it, there'll be twice as much as usual. And after this, it says, this is just Exodus, same chapter, around verse 20 says, after this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. And this for me is a critical point, is that we have to decide if we are going to ensure that work doesn't take over us, what is our actual need that's enough for our family? And then to rest in that, and then to trust God for the provision of anything else that we need. Because when we make it all about the pursuit of stuff and we want more, it's going to rob us in our life. And then it goes on to say, as the sun became hot, the flakes they had not picked up melted and disappeared. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a complete day, will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today and set aside what is left for tomorrow. So they put some aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded. And in the morning, the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots or odor. Remember that the last time they tried to do that, when they took more for them than what was required, guess what happened? It rotted. Moses said, eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. And God is contending with Moses, through Moses, to say, how long will these people refuse to obey my commands and instructions? They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. That is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day, so there'll be enough for 2 days. And what I'm saying is that let us get to a point in our lives where we actually understand what it means for our families, what it is that we need, so we don't have the pressure of constantly trying to get on top of stuff. If you decide for yourself what your lifestyle is, and you say, you know what, we're cool, this is my lifestyle. We're just eating cabbages. That's the lifestyle we want. Cabbage and pork. Boom, that's your lifestyle. And you rest in that. Because now if you want to start going for the caviar and the champagne, that might require you to, and it's a very simplified example, but all I'm saying is that when you don't understand what your own needs are, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you to keep going and working without actually taking time to reflect and rest in the Sabbath that God is asking us to do. We have to be very intentional to rest. So the lesson we learn from the creation story is that there has to be an intentionality to our rest. We learn that there is a rhythm to life. God worked day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Day 7, he said, boom, I'm resting, to reflect on the things that I've done. Understand the seasons and recognize that rest is built into many things in our lives. You know, there is a cadence that I want us to adopt, a cadence that I want us to have. Cadence for your life and business. This will help in deciding your limits so that you can have a lifestyle of rest. In a general sense, the word cadence refers to the rhythmic flow or tempo of something. It can be applied to various contexts, including music, poetry, dance, or even daily routines. In running or cycling, in sport, in fact, I was on the bicycle at the gym, and the word cadence says this is what your cadence is. Your speed, your cycling, or your pedal strokes are this per minute. It is often measured by counting the number of steps or pedal revolutions within a specific time frame. So maintaining an appropriate cadence can help optimize performance, efficiency, and reduce the risk of injuries. In our daily routine and lifestyle, cadence refers to the rhythm, pace, and structure of one's routine. And I feel that when you understand the rhythm of your family life, the rhythm of your life, you will know and say, you know what, this is what my limit is. I'm not willing to bust, my chops more than this, because I know that it's stealing away time from my family. It is a decision that you made. Other people have decided that, it's within their rights to, they have decided by conviction from the Lord that I will not work on a Sunday. Now, that's a personal decision that you have to make. I definitely understand that on our modern world, there are Sunday shifts. People, in mining, in the hospital, they have to work on Sundays. That's, big deal. Just work and don't worry about it. But I think that there is more to this, where all of a sudden you are starting to strain yourself and not taking the time to rest, and it's beginning to impact the quality of your life, the quality of your family life. So when we're intentional to rest, we make technology work for us. Technology doesn't dictate our lives. We dictate what technology does for us. We might have to switch off our phones. When we go out somewhere, you go out somewhere as a family, you might have to put the phones in the pocket. I know that for my boss's family, when they used to go out, they would say, anybody who picks up their phone pays the bill. So I was there with one of her nephews, and we went to some very nice restaurant. And so we said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to call her. And so we called her, and so she picked up the phone, and so she had to pay like a $350 bill. Yeah. But she knew it, And so as we stand this morning, may we stand as we finish. Sabbath rest is an invitation to practice for eternity in God's presence. It is an act of regular and intentional trust of God's rule on earth. We need to be able to trust God and to rest in his presence. And when we practice this purposeful pause, we make room for God to take up residence in our lives and our communities. 1 Corinthians 1:9 says, "For God is faithful, who has called you into fellowship with his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord." Paul was talking to the Corinthians, and these were troubled Corinthian Christians. They were called by God into the fellowship of his own Son, Jesus. All of us are called into that fellowship. This tells us two things about what God intends for us. Number one, he does not mean to save us and then to have us keep our distance until we arrive in eternity. No, he's brought us in, and he wants to fellowship with us all the time. God sees us as being in fellowship, a deep and direct relationship with him, with Christ. And what also Paul is emphasizing is that all who are in Christ are by definition in relationship with one another. So there is a call here from the Lord as we look at this, remembering the Sabbath day, that there is a time where we need to pause and reflect on what the Lord is doing in our lives and what he's done, and just to reflect on him. And sometimes coming on a Sunday, this is what this means. We are pausing and we're reflecting. And I would ask, even though it was difficult for our family to keep the consistency I would just ask that for all of us, let us never abandon the time to take a pause with our family. It could be for 5 minutes. It could be over a meal. Let that be that thing where we gather in fellowship with the Lord and with one another as we reflect on what God has done for us.